We're ready when you are.
Okay. Before I start, just want to say that I am very nervous, so if my voice cracks, just look away. So, hello, my name is Cheyenne Boozer. Today I will be talking about the gender differences in nonverbal communication. So, a lot of people don't know what causes problems. It's like, what was the situation? What was the problem? Why did we start the war? What is the issue? So that's where communication comes in. And it's not so much about, as we know because of written public speaking and taking communication, we know that it's about encoding and decoding messages. Okay. So, miscommunication is the world's biggest problem, and it's the universal exchange. Is real life based on reality or perception? Is real life what you do, or is it what people think you're doing? Here I have a picture of some reality TV contestants from the challenge. And even though you can see here that 3 of the males have crossed arms to symbolize like their dominance, their strength, they are like trying to show their muscles, they're like, ooh, look at me, I'm big. Whereas the girls tend to hold themselves like inward, tend to like sometimes sway to the side, and like girls typically spend time just trying to be as small as possible. However, Nicole is an exception. So that brings me to what gender really is. While gender is a social construct, I will be doing regular, or so I say, social normative definitions of gender. And I'll be talking about males and females. So, I will be going over the main points today, which are behavioral characteristics of nonverbal communication. That includes feelings and expressions of emotions, and information processing, how we take in that information and how we think it takes hold in our brains. We'll also be going over how our body language is, and gestures, and power dynamics. So as for me, I was a writer for New York Times, so I have written about reality TV contestants. I'm also a psychology major, so I have studied social psychology and researched a couple of projects on it. So what brought me to this topic is that I read a fact, and I read a false fact. CNCBC said, women find men who smile more or less attractive. So I was like, I'm a woman. I find people attractive. I think guys are cute when they smile. Why would they say that? So it is miscommunication. Women said that they found men who were proud in their picture more attractive than men who were simply smiling. But they took that as women thought men who were smiling are less attractive, but men who found women who smile less attractive. And here I have a small video before we go into how we process emotion.
Been wired to be more emotional? Not exactly. But new research provides more evidence that the male and female brain may have very different ways of processing emotion. Previous research has shown that women generally experience higher levels of emotional stimulation than men. Now, a large-scale study from the University of Basel suggests that gender differences in emotion processing are also linked to sex variation in memory and brain activity. The Basel researchers designed an experiment to determine.
So as that video began to talk about how we process emotion differently, that's really just a short break so that I can, get myself together. So here we have a picture of Kermit the Frog. Really, that is him smelling the tissue, not crying. So in how we process expressions differently, we go into first an experiment. So we have an experiment. I know these words look really big, but it's really just smelling via sweat. That's what that says. We are smelling via sweat. So they had an experiment where they had about 30 men and 30 women watch movies, and they had them connected to sweat pads. And then those sweat pads were smelt by other women and men to see if we could like emote those feelings via sweat signaling. So what turned out was that basically women produce slightly more fear than men when watching a movie. But what we really found in the results was that women could sense fear more than men, like extraordinarily so. Women were actually able to detect the fear from their noses and produce a physical reaction. So then we move on to pain, because most emotions, men and women feel them about the same: sad, fear, happy. Most of them are kind of general. What changes is how empathetic feelings go. So when adults express pain, it's always like, oh, pain, curse words. But in the experiment, so in the experiment, they had people basically judge based off of participants' reactions. So in this experiment, we had participants being recorded and then shown in a different room with people who were watching that video, and then they were also tested to see if they had any reaction to watching other people be in pain. So women were also more empathetic in that study. And then, so as you can see, it doesn't seem to be much of a difference in expressions of emotion so much as interpretation of how we're feeling. Which takes us to information processing. So in the next experiment that I'm going to talk about, we had more of a cognitive study where they took a group of Switzerland students, separated them by gender, and essentially there were 3 groups. So there's the control group. They had to solve an online task by themselves. And then there's the global priming group. They had to go through a strategy lesson about how to view the world as a whole, and then complete the task. And then there's a third one where they had to do a local strategy where they had to fine-tune small details and then complete the task. So the researchers did this task hoping to show that women were like superior in processing, which they did, because we are. However, it did show that when women were exposed to these alternative processing strategies, we actually got worse at interpreting the task compared to the control group, whereas men were performing much better with both local and global priming compared to the control group. So that led us to believe that women just naturally have a set of processing skills that men just don't seem to have, which is a weird topic that goes into evolution, and I will come back to that later. In a similar experiment, they actually recorded parts of the brain to see if this was scientifically advanced enough, because a lot of evidence can be fabricated, but they did study gamma results to make sure that it works. So in the cortical processing, which is the similar study that I just mentioned, they really watched geoshapes and then assigned social interactions to the shapes. And women were also better at describing the reactions. Okay. So as we saw, women are noticing more. But what is it about nonverbal communication that really matters? It's like, I can speak, I can type. Why do people need